Hi, my name's Nick Broughton and I'm a Randomfish. Hit that subscribe button and we'll be Randomfishes together, shall we? Okay guys, so I watched Titans. Yeah, if you follow me at all on Facebook, I did put out a status saying that, well, I needed time to think. I needed time to take a step back to absorb what I'd watched and to really think about it. And I did. I slept, I thought about it, and I came to the conclusion that I'm no closer to a real opinion now than I was then. And I don't think I'm going to be. Because Titans to me is what I'm going to say is a very opinion-changing series. You constantly shift your opinion between what is awesome and what is, huh? Half the time. First off, I'm just going to go through the plot or plots interweaving in this. First of all, this show follows the Netflix Marvel situation, i.e. the whole one continuous story over a series of episodes, just with a whole bunch of plots all squeezed in. And the plots go like this. You first have Dick Grayson living in Detroit. He has left Batman and he is occasionally still dressing up as Robin and beating the shit out of criminals, even though he says he doesn't want to. Kind of weird. You then have a memory-lost Starfire running around, trying to figure out what the hell is actually going on and why she can't remember a thing. You then have Rachel Roth, or Raven, realizing that her powers are getting her being hunted by a bunch of people, and she ends up going to Dick Grayson for help, or at least ends up finding him by accident, and then realizing that because she's seen him in a dream and all this sort of crap. And then you have Gar, who was experimented on, and that's why he's got his powers, and he's living with a bunch of people, and he ends up joining the Titans out of a need of sort of being around Rachel and helping her out. Now, these episodes, they work well, and sometimes they don't. This is going to get very complicated. So I'm just going to say from the outset, if you don't get my opinion, that's fine. But to me, this is where I stand. The things that were awesome in the show were the following. For example, getting to see a live-action Jason Todd. That, to me, was a big one. I loved that that was finally something that we could see on the screen. I know that Jason Todd is a character that we've now seen a lot of in media, and I understand that people can sometimes be sick of him. But here's my point. The version of Jason that we meet in this isn't the Jason Red Hood. This is Jason Todd when he's Robin. And he's not just bitter and angry towards Bruce. He is still Robin, he still thinks the whole thing's brilliant, and he still has a lot of fun doing stuff. And that's kind of where a lot of it comes from for him. One of my other favourite points is that Dick Grayson, the entire casting across the board, was done really well. These are people that were good choices for the roles, they had a lot of fun with it, and there's a personal favourite of mine where one of the characters who plays a member of a psychotic family trying to capture Rachel for her father's followers. And included in them, the person who plays the daughter in that whole family, I know from another show that I've watched. Some of you may have watched, I don't know. Some of the younger people in the world might have watched it, but I watched it because I thought it was kind of an interesting thing to watch, called Lost and Found Music Studios. She plays a character who essentially breaks down and has essentially an anxiety attack or some kind of really strong and powerful reaction to a situation that she feels she can't control. And honestly, her as a psychopath, she's really good. And it's one of those things where you watch these characters, and even the side characters, even those characters who shouldn't really be trying so hard because they are literally just side characters, they do a tremendously good job. They really do. And it's brilliant to see. So the acting across the whole board, from the main characters to the extras, is good all the way through for me. And one of the other things that I kind of enjoyed about it was, in a weird way, the CG for me. DC shows have this tendency, at least in the CW universe, to have the most amazing on-person CG effects. When you try to create something out of nothing, it feels a little less there, but then that's just me talking because I see things from a behind the camera perspective. So for me, for example, in Legends of Tomorrow Season 3, there's a gigantic CG effect that's at the end of the series, and it's just, ooh. Like, if you're watching this and you have a strong imagination, I get that, and I get sort of seeing going, oh my god, it's like he's really there, oh my god. To me, it just didn't feel like that. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from for me. I like the idea of monsters that live inside human forms, or human forms that are evil. I find that to be more interesting for a shot in live action. I think if it comes down to stuff like animation, then I think what could be really cruddy CG characters in live action could be really great in animation, and I love that. But for me, Titans took that and they still worked well with it, and they still gave this amazing on-person CG thing. Like, for example, whenever Starfire does her thing, for those of you who don't know, Starfire is essentially a character that bursts into flames, like her hair bursts into flames, and she has fire powers and all this sort of thing. And the design, the way she's done, is so well executed that I legitimately found myself going, wow, that's really effective. I really like that. I like the characters. I like everything about it. There's certain things that I didn't like about the CG, but they're very small, and they don't take me out of the shot. They don't take me out of the feeling I have of the scene, which I think is the best thing ever. CG, I think we've all become very aware, isn't really, like, we know that it's not really there, and sometimes if it's too big and too bombastic and too in your face, you end up being taken out of the scene a hell of a lot more. And I think that's one of the biggest problems on that show anyway. For some of us anyway, and those are the good things about the show, and I really do mean that, and I love this show. This show is good. It's a good show, but the problem that I have with shows of this magnitude is threefold. Number one, the constantly overlapping stories. I have no issue with stories tying into other stories. I don't. But I sometimes feel as though, in this show particularly, it felt like they were trying to scrap so much in there that they never gave it much of a chance to breathe. And then by the time one of the other stories was given enough time to breathe, it didn't feel very... It felt very naked, having just the one plot. Here's something that I'm going to... okay, in The Flash, you have the main A story, and then you have the B stories that run throughout the show. The A plot is the overarching story. The B plots are the little plots they put in between the in between episodes. So the the episodic adventures, if you will. And while I don't hate the Netflix brand of storytelling, i.e. one event like with multiple storylines crossing over, in Daredevil it worked. In Daredevil it worked, in Jessica Jones it worked, in Punisher it worked, in Iron Fist it worked, in Luke Cage it works, and even in the Defenders it definitely worked. But there's something about the way that this was done that didn't feel very... It just didn't feel very organic to me, and it just didn't feel very linked. And while I loved the show, that kept on nagging me in the back of my mind. You get the whole Dick Grayson and Raven meeting each other thing throughout the show, and I do get why he ends up doing the stuff that he does, And I do understand why he ends up being the character that he is. But to me, at least, it didn't feel very much like an A story. It felt very much like an attempt at a silly B-plot that just didn't go anywhere. And it didn't help that you had all these other plots that sort of turned up out of nowhere. Some of them did last in episodic sort of styles. For example, Gar and his origin. That took up one episode, and I liked that. What didn't help to me was that the whole Dick Grayson Robin story just didn't feel very right to me. And Grayson, as far as I was always concerned, was always meant to be the light in Batman's darkness. And while I get that they wanted to do a story about him sort of having to face the fact that he had darkness in him just as much as Batman did, Dick Grayson's whole point is that he was the serious leader, but he was also the chatty, happy superhero. He was always the happy hero. He didn't sit around and brood. He wasn't Batman. That was his whole point, his whole ethos. And I think this series very much tried to take us to a place where Dick's progress kept on starting and then going backwards. It's like they tried to play a tape on a VCR and then have to rewind it because they go, oh, you missed this bit. Oh, this second is good again. Let's rewatch that. Constantly going back and back over the same footage again and again. And it just didn't... It felt very much like for one step forward, he was taking 2 steps back. And not just... And it's not just the character that's doing that. It's the audience that's doing that. And I don't feel like I can maintain a character connection with this guy if he's going to keep falling into the same pits over and over again. And while I do understand that when it comes to self-improvement, there is no easy fix. It takes a while. You have to learn how to do these things, blah, blah, blah. And I do get that. But to me, the biggest... this leads into not my biggest problem, but one of my major issues with the show. It's finale. Now, obviously, I put this in the title, I put this in the description, I'm going to put it all over as much as I possibly can, but this is laden with spoilers. So many friggin' spoilers. So if you haven't watched the show yet, watch Titans. If you've got it on Netflix, watch it on Netflix first, and then come back to me. Or if you've got it on the DC streaming service, go to that one. That's where it came first. Hopefully, everyone who's watching this video has watched that show. If not, sorry, not going to happen. The finale involves Trigon. He's come back. Raven has brought him back. And he puts Grayson in this little simulation in his own mind. Where he's happy, he's got a wife, he's got a kid and another kid on the way. And then he's visited by a crippled Jason Todd, who tells him that the Joker has killed Commissioner Gordon, and Batman is now on the run, is now going on the quest to kill the Joker. He now wants death of the Joker. And he tells Dick that only he can stop Bruce from making that mistake. Grayson goes to Gotham in an attempt to stop him. He tries to reason with Bruce, it doesn't happen, and he ends up kicking Bruce's ass and killing him after telling the police that he knows who Batman is. And then the finale doesn't involve... It involves Trigon telling Rachel that, you know, Grayson now belongs to him and that now he's gonna, you know, bring about the changes in the world and bring about the rebuilding of the world and the rebirth of the world and blah, 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 and all this sort of thing. Very all much demon-y talk at the end. And Grayson looks like he's possessed, a bit like how Rachel looks at the show when she looks in the mirror. It's the version of her with like the black eyes and the running down mascara. It almost feels like you're looking at that, but on Grayson. And to me, that feels like the most wasted of opportunities, the most pathetic build-up to a secondary season. And while I love the idea of a secondary season, the second season, and I would love it if they do that, please bring in the season 2 of Titans. I don't care if it doesn't continue after Season 2, but just bring in Season 2 so we can get Grayson back, please. But to me, the biggest issue that comes from this is that you didn't have a proper ending. While I know that shows try to have a, they try to leave you with wanting more so you can come back for a second season, it still you still have to wrap up what happened in the first season. Even Daredevil does that to an extent. You know, Jessica Jones did it to an extent. So did Iron Fist. So did Luke Cage. So did the Defenders. So did the other CW DC shows. The other DC shows still wrap up the story. Like in the first season of The Flash, Thorn is defeated, and he is, you know, even to the point of possibly killed. Although we find out later, not actually dead. But you still have the main villain of the series eradicated. He no longer exists. But there is a threat that happens at the end of the season that then leads into the next season. But you still have the hope and the happiness that the main villain is finished. And that's what I feel Titans missed. I feel like Trigon should not have been killed, but Trigon should have been sent back by Rachel. Grayson should have not talked to Bruce, but beaten the crap out of him in a new persona that he then creates for himself. And then when he wakes up, he tells Rachel that they've got work to do after he sends Trigon back. Her mother is unconscious or whatever, and as they leave, she asks him what the hell's going on. He goes, I have a new idea. I'm no longer Robin, but I am something else. I am someone else. You know, do the Arrow conversation. And then the ending would almost involve him carrying the twin batons back with him to signify his ascendance to Nightwing, which is kind of what most of us know Dick Grayson as, especially as comic book readers. We know him as Nightwing. We know him as the first Robin, and then we know him as Nightwing. We don't... I think that's a very strong missed opportunity. We didn't need to have Nightwing in the first season, but what we did... I think what we did want is to have a character ending, a character arc end. That's what we want. We got halfway through one with Grayson, with his destruction of the Robin costume and his sort of denial of Jason, his sort of hatred of Jason Todd's way of doing things, blah, blah, blah. But it just didn't feel very completed, and I think that's the biggest thorn in my side for this show. I understand that sometimes shows do that, and maybe that's just the watcher in me talking, you know, the consumer of television in me talking. That might have something to do with it, but for me at least, I just wished they'd found a way of at least taking Trigon back to his hellhole. I would have preferred that. Although, I'll be honest, if they do bring Bruce Wayne actually in Season 2 and actually have him talking to Grayson, I'm also pointing out that if Titans is part of the DCEU, I don't know if Affleck's still attached in any way, shape or form. I'm kind of sad that if he's not, because frankly I would love it if you could see the fact that, you know, you see that the DCEU Batman is the Batman who fathered Grayson, who raised Grayson, because that way his complete violence streak would actually work within his context. It would. I think that would be brilliant. But obviously, you can't get everything that you want. And for what we got, the show is good. It's not perfect, but it's good. I enjoyed it. I always have. I always will. And I might watch it again sometime. But for now, I'm keeping to my CW shows. I'm keeping to the CW shows because, to me at least, even though they're a little bit of a pain, and even though they're not exactly constant with their plots and everything else, but at least they have an overarching story plot, and at least they have occasional fun, and their acting is hammy. But you know what? It's CW. What did you expect? These are the same people that brought us Smallville, for crying out loud. But no. In complete honesty, go watch Titans. If you've watched this review and you haven't seen Titans, I've spoiled the whole thing for you, so screw you. But no, go watch Titans. Watch Titans, enjoy it. If you have watched it and you've watched this review, watch it again. just like I will do at some point. But you know what? That's me pretty much done with that sort of conversation. So, you know, it's all over the place, but I feel like the show's slightly all over the place as well. So I do recommend it. I do recommend watching it. But I'm not quite sure if I always recommend liking everything. But hey, this is the show that brought us a live-action Jason Todd, so you know what? Hell yeah. But, join me next week for when there's a 4 furry-legged superhero that I kind of want to talk about in the next review. Randomfish out.